Well, you can't go to the fair without bumping into somebody running for office. We're about 2.5 months out from Election Day. Races are already heating up, and when that comes time, arguably the biggest race on the ballot in the state of Minnesota is that for governor. Tonight, however, Republican candidate for Minnesota governor, Dr. Scott Jensen, is still facing some pushback after comments linking guidelines called for by Governor Tim Walz at the beginning of the pandemic to actions. He's comparing the guideline actions to those taken by the Nazi regime in the 30s in Germany. Meghanreistad is here tonight. Megan, you spoke with Scott Jensen today about why he made that comparison, and you also talked to Jewish leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about what you heard?
Sure, Jana. Let's start with when Dr. Jensen first made this comparison. So this was back in April. He was speaking to a room of supporters when he compared what Governor Walz chose to do in the pandemic with restrictions to the early days of Nazi rule. Yesterday, Jensen doubled down on his Facebook page, defending using that comparison. And today, I went to ask him about it in person.
I think it's a legitimate comparison. It may not strike your fancy, that's fine. But this is how I think.
That was what Republican nominee for governor Scott Jensen said yesterday on Facebook, defending the comparison to Nazi rule he made in April.
And you don't get to be my thought police person. I get to think myself and do for myself.
And this is part of Jensen's speech that has people talking.
If you look at the 1930s and you look at it carefully, we could see some things happening, little things that people chose to push aside. It's going to be okay. And then the little things grew into something bigger. Then there was a night called Kristallnacht, the night of the breaking glass. Then there was the book burning. And it kept growing and growing. And a guy named Hitler kept growing in power. And World War II came about. Well, in a way, I think that's why you're here today, is you sense that something's happening and it's growing little by little.
Jensen spoke Wednesday.
When we ask people, what do they really want?
At the grand opening of a new Somali community center in Minneapolis. As he was leaving the event, I asked him about his decision to make this comparison.
The obvious lesson with the Holocaust is, without question, the horrific genocide that was committed. But the subtle lessons also have to be learned. And that's why I was willing to speak to that issue. I think there are subtle lessons in the 1930s that match up with the subtle lessons during this COVID pandemic, where whether you're talking about contact tracing, tracing people against their will with their phone, creating snitch lines, call us and tell us what your neighbors, what they're doing. These kinds of things were things that happened in the 1930s. And it engendered a culture where this kind of thing can happen.
Every one of us.
Ethan Roberts is the Director of Government Affairs at the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas.
We don't want to be here in the middle of a political campaign, but we are the consensus voice for our community, and so we're going to stand up.
Roberts says he's tired of having this conversation.
Since April of 2020, we have said over and over and over again, to the point where, feeling like no one's listening, that these comments are inflammatory. They trivialize the Holocaust. They are just wrong, so wrong. I understand he's trying to talk about incrementalism, but why can't Dr. Jensen find some other analogy that doesn't involve first the dehumanization of my people and then the systemic murder and genocide of my people?
And Jensen is standing by what he said in the spring.
I'm passionate in my support of the state of Israel as well as the Jewish people. Thank you.
Also on Tuesday, the wife of Minnesota Senator Jim Abler, Barb Abler, tweeted this response to criticism of Jensen. We have a screenshot of that tweet. You can see it right there on your screen. This is before it was deleted. Now, we reached out to Abler's office, the Minnesota Republican Party, Minnesota Senate Republican Caucus, and the Republican Jewish Coalition. We have not yet heard back. Jana?
All right. Thanks so much, Megan. We appreciate it.